All right, good evening. It is 7:30 and we're going to call this meeting to order. This meeting of the Denville Township Board of Education is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Daily Record and or the Star Ledger of Morris County, has been delivered to the Township Clerk, and has been posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education office and at each of the school buildings in the district. Roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Here.
Mrs. Wagner? Mr. Cass?
Here.
Mr. Kim?
Here.
Dr. Aruna Ditasan? Dr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here. And we do not have a need for executive session, so please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we have two special presentations tonight, so I'd like to invite up our auditors to begin their presentation for the 2021-2022 presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. I'm Brian Coe. I am your audit manager. I run the team here on site. I've actually been on the Denville audit for 11 years, starting as a staff. I started with Ingrid and Kathy. And now I get to run the job. So it's just a personal note that I've been around for quite some time. Okay, so you all have your handouts in front of you. I'm going to go over some key highlights for the financials. I do have to hold this, right? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we ended the year 2022 as of June 30th with $11 million in fund balance. Last year at the end of 21, we had about $12 million, so that's a decrease of $995,000. The reasons for that are as follows. Encumbrances decreased by $267,000. Those are goods and services that you haven't yet received, so something you've ordered but hasn't come in yet. Capital reserve decreased by $1.7 million. Maintenance reserve stayed the same. You can withdraw those things for regular maintenance, but the ending balance remained the same as the beginning. Current year excess surplus also remained consistent at $200,000, and that's to be used in the 23-24 budget year. Unemployment compensation increased $183,000. And then the budgeted for succeeding year, so the to be used in the 22-23 budget is also $200,000, which remain consistent. And then unassigned fund balance increased by $243,000. That is the 4% that's allowed for the year for 22 year and for the last year, 21 year. Next year, your unassigned balance is going to be limited to 2% back the way it was before COVID. All right, so then the $995,000 decrease is made up of these different items here. You had a excess in local revenues, an excess in state revenues, which was mostly your extraordinary aid, a small deficit in the federal revenue, which was from your semi. Unexpended budget appropriations was $3.8 million, and I'll get back to that in a second. Surplus used was the $200,000 as from above. Prior year encumbrances, $2 million. Budget withdrawal from capital reserve was $2.9 million, and budget withdrawal from maintenance was $200,000. So as noted above, with that 3.8 unexpended budget appropriations, that includes 2.3 million of encumbrances. So the amount unexpended is really about 1.5, because you will be spending the majority of those encumbrances in probably the past couple of months since June 30th. So your unexpended budget appropriations, you had almost 1.5 there, the 1,488,171. So we broke that down for you. Unexpended capital reserve project balances. So those are the budgeted anticipated amounts. Some of that you didn't spend, so you're required to send that back to capital reserve. You also had a small safety grant and refunds from FEMA reimbursements throughout the year. The one student from North Plainfield and the additional extraordinary aid of $275,000. So that comes to about $1.2 million. So the remaining budget appropriation or unspent expenditures was 234,000. So it's important to note that if you hadn't received all those extras, you would have only had 234,000 left over at the year. So we didn't anticipate the FEMA reimbursements, the homeless, or the big increase in that X aid. So it was a closer year than usual to what was budgeted. Any questions on that so far? Okay. So then on the back, we were just showing the anticipated budget amount. You guys have been consistent for the past couple of years, anticipating $200,000, which is exactly what we want to see. We want to not see big ups and downs in the anticipated excess surplus there. And then the rest of this here is just for informational purposes. You can see what we did with capital reserve, how it started, what was transferred by resolution at the end of the year, what was withdrawn, and what part of that withdrawn was sent back. And same with maintenance reserve. We ended up funding maintenance reserve back to what it was at the beginning of the year because some of the money was used to fund the budget. And at the bottom, the long-term liabilities, finance purchases payable is your capital leases. There was a new GASB statement this year that changed. Capital leases is now called finance purchases. So that's the only difference there. And then your leases payable is your operating leases. So those would be things like copiers, but also the school next door, the annex building is included in that. So that's the majority of that is I believe there's about 500,000 left on that lease as of June 30th. So then the copiers is just 4,000 or about that. And then compensated absences, those are the balances due on sick and vacation time that is owed to employees. Now it's important to note that that money is usually taken out of the current year budget, and it happens every year. Somebody retires, gets a little bit of sick time or vacation time paid out. And that's just we do book that in the audit. And then your net pension liability decreased to $6 million. You have no control over that whatsoever. Those are numbers given to you by the state. That happened 4 years ago or so where they started making us include that in your audited report. So that's what I had planned to talk about. Does anybody have any questions?
So I see, just a quick question. I know that net pension liability, like you said, we have no control over, but I notice a big decrease. Any reason for that?
It's just so they take the total number of employees in the state. So any small change, if you guys went down 3 and everybody else went up 3 employees, a small change in percentages can make a big difference in that number because it is a statewide allocation.
Got it. Thank you.
And we do see that in a lot of districts. There's drastic changes in between there because that's it cut by 25%. That's a big change.
Any questions from anyone on the board so far?
All right, great. Thank you for having us. Remember, we're here all year long. If you have any questions during budget time or any other time of the year, we're always here to answer your questions. And thank you for having continued faith in us.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And thank you to our business office for their hard work on ensuring another good audit, and appreciate the work from you and your team. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you to Damaris and her team. They always are the first ready to go. I get to come out in the end of July, which we really appreciate that. No one else is ever ready. And we really appreciate that. And it helps us use our time wisely. And you do a great job. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank everybody, and yes, Brian does all the work. Right?
You too. Have a good night. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our next special presentation, which is our 2021-2022 District Harassment, Intimidation, Bullying, Self-Grading presentation. Dr. Forte.
You've probably already seen it, but I figured I would show this video real quick that we made promoting our strategic plan as an invitation. So we're really trying to promote the strategic plan, get as many people out as possible, have some children involved, and we're going to keep promoting it. So anything, from the board, you need help, I sent you the link. If you could repost that on Facebook for me. Just to go over our annual self-evaluation, our staff goes through all the modules and they take a look at where we fit. And the different modules are HIB programs, HIB training on Board of Ed, HIB policies, which changes often, HIB staff training, curriculum instruction on HIB, HIB personnel, school level HIB reporting, HIB investigation procedures, and HIB reporting. After going through all those different areas, our staff has graded themselves. Valley View graded 78 out of 78, Riverview 76 out of 78, and Lakeview 77 out of 78. These grades get submitted to the state, and then we get a report back, and they're posted on the website, and people can look at that. And we've always done real well on the self-evaluation, and we're always looking at ways we can improve ourselves in all areas, and particularly in this area. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Forte. Just a quick question. I appreciate you including on the board report the specific grading categories. It was I can't remember if I've looked at this before, but I went through each one to kind of take a look. And some of the grades, I know it's self-assessment, and obviously a few of the schools had a few things they felt like there was some areas for improvement. But how subjective or objective are these kind of criteria? Because I mean, how do you assess that? Most of these are scored 0 through 3. Is there something to say this is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3, that kind of thing?
Well, like some of them, for example, if you look at element 5, indicator A, the principal appointed a school anti-bullying specialist. I think that's just, you did it, you get 3. If you didn't do it, you get 0. Or I guess you could get a 1 or a 2 if you did it late or something along those lines. But so most of them are you either did it or didn't do it. And then there are some that you could have done. Maybe there's where we feel we did a decent job at it, but we could do a little better. So it is pretty subjective in some areas. Some areas I think are pretty objective, like either you did it or didn't do it. But overall, the team works together. It's this whole group that comes together and decides where they're at. There's worksheets, and then this is the final project. What you're saying, this is like the thing that gets submitted to the state. That's off their website.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Forte on the HIB self-assessment? Okay. Move on to the remainder of the agenda. Just as an FYI, we have a few special presentations coming up on October 24th, our next meeting, Lakeview Week of Respect, Pride presentation. Look forward to that. I assume that's staff and students potentially coming in for that. Excellent. Excited for that. And then Dr. Cullis will be presenting the 2021-2022 testing data. I had a chance to catch up with her last week, and she was excited to present that. So look forward to that presentation. And then, as Dr. Forte just said, our strategic planning then following up November 14th, 28th, and December 12th at the Riverview all-purpose room. So move on to superintendent's comments. Dr. Forte.
Okay, just one quick thing, really. Well, first of all, we have to get that MOU signed. The memorandum of understanding and the memorandum of agreement are things that we do every year with the police, and it will be on the agenda for the next board meeting for board approval, and then it gets sent to the county. And my meeting with the regional superintendents and police officers is tomorrow. So after I meet with them, we will have it on the agenda for approval, and then it'll get sent down to the county. It goes to the county superintendent of schools, and it also goes to the prosecutor's office, and then we get it back. And the memorandum of understanding and memorandum of agreement are things that help with sharing of information between the police and the schools. Our Denville app, there is an issue with Apple, with the Apple App Store. For some reason, there's some kind of problem. I'm not sure all the details of why, but you can't you can't find it on the App Store right now. Only Apple. Google Play, it still works, but on Apple, it doesn't. The company's aware, and it's some kind of glitch on the company side. It's something with the website company, and they're working on fixing it. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that it is it is in the Friday folder, a reminder to people in case they're looking for it. But we expect to have that fixed fairly soon. And that's my comments for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Forte, and move on to Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Cullis.
This past week, we had our Week of Respect activities in all 3 buildings, and next week we will have an opportunity to see some of the hear about some of the activities and see some of the recognition from Lakeview School. So you'll have a chance to see that at our next board meeting. But the weeks consisted of dress-up days, assemblies, student recognition, meetings with our bus drivers, a variety of activities for a Week of Respect. October 26th and 27th are our parent-teacher conferences. One thing to be aware of, kindergarten identification surveys went out to parents, or their scales went out to parents today, and please return those either at your parent conference, or we'll have hard copies that you could complete at the conference. And that is just for kindergarten. And this is part of the New Jersey Strengthening Gifted and Talented Education Act. We began last year identifying students starting in kindergarten. And so this is a piece of the process where the parents can give us some information about what they're seeing at home with their students, with their children. And finally, an FYI, the kindergarten right now is sitting at 183 students. This concludes Assistant Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Cullis. And Mrs. Skorowski, the Business Administrator comments, anything?
Just one. As a result of the implementation with COVID-19, we have with the social distancing, we had to put tape and stickers on throughout the district. And this past summer, we cleaned up and remediated Valley View, just to start with that one school. And it cost the district approximately $60,000 unbudgeted funds. However, Dr. Forte had the greatest idea that, hey, this is COVID-related expense. Let's see if we can get a FEMA application through. And we did submit an application, and this was the first time they had seen this type of request because nobody else has done it before. And sure enough, they looked into it. We submitted all the photographs, narratives, application, and all the required documents, and they approved $55,000 out of the $60,000. And we already received the funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Skorowski, and thank you, Dr. Forte. Appreciate the diligence on obviously getting some FEMA money for appropriate use for COVID. So that's great. We're going to move to our open public discussion, first one of the evening. It is 7:49. I'll open up for public discussion. No one's in the chambers from the public, so I will hold off on reading the statement. And seeing no one come forward, I will close our first public discussion session at 7:49 also and move on to our agenda. And Mr. Capello, would you mind moving us through old business, no action to be taken?
I'd be happy to. At the next meeting, I or someone else will be moving items A, B, and C. A are the reports from September 2022, Treasurer of School Monies and Board Secretary. B, education reports, report of student enrollment, report of the health office for September 2022, and a 2021-2022 district HIB self-grading report, which we saw this evening, and finally an HIB case VV 222301, as well as C, the minutes from our work and regular session and executive session meeting from September 12th, 2022.
Any questions on those reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business action to be taken. I think who's on personnel? Is it Mr. Capello? Are you on personnel?
Yeah, Laura and I, yes.
Okay. Would you mind taking that then?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no objections, under personnel, I would like to move A, items 1 through Bear with me a second here. Looks like 12, 1 through 12 as a block.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Capello. Mr. Kim, any questions, comments? No, we have one new employee, Colleen Waislick. Is that correct, Dr. Forte? Going to be joining us. So welcome to her. Any questions, comments?
Under number 7, the Walgreens for the flu clinic for the staff. How do we go about picking them? And I should know this, but is it always Walgreens, or does it vary, or basically how do we decide that?
It is Walgreens, just because the Walgreens reached out to us, and the head nurse, Jessica, I guess built up a rapport with them over the years, and she sets it up with them. But this doesn't have to be them. It's just they offered to do it. It's totally voluntary. It's just a service we're giving to the staff if they'd like to do it.
And just for clarity, more for the public than anybody, we are not paying for that, right? That's just, they would obviously use their insurance or however they would pay for it normally at Walgreens. We're just literally providing a location for Walgreens to come set up for convenience for our staff.
Yeah, there's no cost to the district for this. And we do it in 3 different locations for convenience of the staff. And we do get a good turnout.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes. And Mr. Capello, we'll kick it back to you. You might as well run this whole meeting for
Sounds-
instruction program.
Sounds like a plan. If there are no objections, instructional program, I'd like to move items 1 through 4 as a block. They include workshop expenses, attached field trip list, and additionally, looks like approval for someone from the Morris County Prosecutor's Office to speak to Valley View students. And lastly, Mary Oates to provide professional development, ensuring effective instruction in every classroom to Morris Catholic High School, with title to Morris Catholic funds, which are a pass-through to us, from us. to
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Capello and Mr. Cass. Any questions, comments?
I guess similar question on the prosecutor's office. Is that something we reached out? Did they reach out to us? Is the program they're doing?
We reached out to them because there's just some things that need to be said, I think, at the middle school, and it's important for them to have this presentation.
And we've done something similar to this in the past, yes?
Yeah, we actually do something like this every year.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes, and move on to finance. Mr. Kim, please.
Sure. I motion that we approve tonight under Section C, Finance, number 1, the contract with Summit Speech School to provide itinerant services to a student for this school year at a rate of $195 per hour. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Kim and Mr. Cass. Any questions or comments on that one item? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes. And Mr. Cass, would you mind moving us through operations, please?
I'm going to ask the board to approve the joint transportation agreements with the following entities to provide transportation for students to athletic events and trips for the 2022-2023 school year. We have the Wharton School District, Rockaway Borough School District, Morris Hills Regional School District, Morris County Votech School District, Parsippany Troy Hills School District, Boonton School District, Boonton Borough, and Little Learners School.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cass and Mr. Capello. Any questions, comments? Mrs. Korowski, just to confirm, these agreements are just as needed, right? In other words, we typically don't need them, but we have them there available if there is a need for it. Is that correct?
That is correct. We decided to put the surrounding school districts in case we might need them or they might need us, vice versa. They will be approving the similar resolutions on their end as well.
Great. Sounds awesome. I think as we have had struggles with transportation and drivers and whatnot, I think doing something like this is appreciated. So thank you for being proactive with it. Any other questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes. All right, let's move on to new business. No action to be taken. I'll kick it back over to Mr. Capello for personnel.
Excellent, thank you. At the next meeting, I or Mrs. Wagner will be asking for your approval on items 1 through, sorry, my fingers are not working tonight. 1 through 3 under personnel. They include pay changes, resignations, retirements, employee leaves, extra pay adjustments, a leave for leave of absence for an employee. What else we have? Actually, another leave under the Employee Family Leave Act, a couple of those, as well as the attached sidebar agreement for the DEA regarding payment of waiver of health benefits.
Any questions or comments on those 3 items? All right, we'll move on. Back to you, Mr. Capello, for instruction and program.
Okay, at the next meeting, I or someone else will be moving items 1 and 2 under instruction and programming, including items for workshop expenses. At this time, there's 1, and as well as approving Valley View personnel to discard a attached list of out-of-date books.
Any questions or comments on those 2 items? Policy revisions. Dr. Moore, would you mind moving us through policy revisions? Once again, this is for next meeting, so no action to be taken.
Sure. Under policy revisions, either myself or someone else will move for approval at the next meeting. Under number 1, policy regulation number R2425, emergency virtual or remote instruction program, that's new. P2425, emergency virtual or remote instruction program, revised. P5512, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, revised. And P0167, public participation in board meetings, revised.
Any questions or comments on those 4 policies?
We reviewed in instruction and program, we reviewed the public participation in board meeting policy. And I think you might have had one question about some of the language. But one key point was, and this came back from the attorneys, in terms of the requirements, making sure people identify themselves when they're participating, making a public comment, that we are not going to request to have their camera on. They will have to identify themselves and their address, et cetera. But the attorney felt that that might be a kind of a requirement too far. I raised that because, interestingly, I read an article today that talked about an employee that was given a settlement for wrongful termination because their employer couldn't ask them to keep their camera on during the meeting because it was an invasion of the person's privacy. So I'm not sure if that was what the attorneys were talking about when they were thinking about this, but I thought that was interesting. So anyway, my long way of saying that we reviewed the policy, we basically agreed with it as is. We think it's a good step forward.
Yeah, I appreciate all the committees reviewing, Dr. Forte taking a look at it. I agree with, I think it was Mrs. Wagner that brought up the initial discussion about it, and I think Dr. Moore too brought it up. I think it's good that we can get a policy in place to kind of have some guidelines and guardrails around it to make sure we handle it appropriately, but also allow that interaction with the public, because as we can see, like tonight, we often don't have individuals that are able to come out in person, but many times we do have folks that are public that are online watching. So if they'd like to make a comment, they'll still be able to. So, Dr. Forte, I think you can.
Yeah, I do. I just want to make sure, because it's long, it's wordy, and make sure that everybody understands exactly what it means. We will allow for, like we do, you can still stream it, you can view it, and once this policy has been amended, the first possible meeting this would have taken effect would be in December. So it still has to go through the process of the board approval, reading 1 in October, reading 2 in November. So the first meeting wouldn't be until December where we do this. And I think a very important point to note in the policy for the board members and also the public is that if the only way you can participate virtually would be to use Google Meet. You would not be able to participate virtually if you used a phone call and call into the line. We would not have the ability to have you comment. So if it's a courtesy, it's a way for the board to try to involve more of the public, but there are some limitations. And one of the limitations that we just said is you're going to need to use the Google Meet, either the app on your phone or the web version on your computer to do any type of a communication with the board during a meeting. And it will not be done in the comment section. It will only be allowed to do it verbally. You'll be unmuted and you'll have your chance to speak to the board at that time.
So Dr. Forte, and I guess the rest of the board members who kind of reviewed this policy probably more detailed than I did throughout the process, did the question come up if the person states their name and doesn't, because I think it says in the policy they need to have their name on the Google Meet. If the name doesn't match, I assume we should stop and ask the person to clarify, or maybe at least, I'm not sure.
I mean, you're right. That's what the policy says. So you're right. I mean, a strict adherence to that would be that they would have to match. Now, interesting question, right? Because I'm sure all of us have had that experience where we log in Google Meet or Zoom and it has my son's name or my son has my name. So it's a good point. Yeah, I don't know, Steve. What's your feeling about an item?
I think asking the question and a reasonable answer like that would be okay in my book, as long as there was some type of a reasonable answer.
Yeah, I think it's different if it says, Patrick Anderson and I say I'm Michael Anderson, as opposed to it says Michael Anderson and I say I'm John Smith. I think that probably some reasonable understanding on that, because I agree. I was thinking the exact same scenario we get all the time when we see individuals that come on the Google Meets, and a lot of times they're getting on from their child's Chromebook, or their child had logged into the account, or spouse, or whatever it might be. So, okay. Any other questions on that policy? I know it was a big one that we wanted to make sure we get some guardrails around. And like I said, I'm encouraged that we're going to be able to offer that as an option for public. And I know we probably overthought a lot of it in a good way. However, I do have a feeling like Denville's a really good community. They're all going to do the right thing. If they want to come on and make a comment, just like when people come in the public, we almost never have individuals that are rowdy or out of control or anything like that. It's generally very calm, and even if they disagree with us, they're usually presented in a positive, or at least in a professional way, I should say. So
I'd like to mention one thing about the policies on the emergency virtual instruction that did come up as a debate question. at the candidates debate, and everybody had a chance to answer it. And it seems, and I think there's a 3-day window before that we declared an emergency, and then the local school boards have control over that type of situation. But it appears that a lot of people like snow days when there's no school.
The right now, the current law is that you could use a remote day, but it would have to be after 3 days, and it has to be it would have to be 3 consecutive days, and then after it would have to be during a state of emergency. So there's a lot of things in place. And I agree with Don, and I think the sentiment of the board too is that we can use snow days like we normally do. We build them in the calendar. But I also think that if there was a big blizzard and on day 4, why not do one? I mean, after that, how many snowmen can you make? It's time to start doing something again, right? I know Dr. Cullis feels that way too about instruction. So I think that would be a good way to, I think it's a reasonable policy.
I agree with that. And I think I guess to wrap that up, the fear that everyone has, or not everyone, but some people have, that every time schools are closed for snow, we're just going to have the kids sit in front of a computer, is not what the reality is right now, nor does anyone plan to do that in the future, immediate future, I should say. So any other questions or comments on policy? Seeing none, we'll move on to finance. Mr. Kim, please.
Sure. During the next meeting, there will be a motion to approve Section D Finance numbers 1 through 5. Number 1 being the checklist, as always, and number 2 being the budget calendar for the fiscal year 23-24, as well as proposals from Creative Library Concepts, and the exception of donation of dictionaries to 3rd grade students, and a donation of $1,950 from the Municipal Alliance to fund the Stephen Hill Speak Sobriety Program.
I'll second.
Next meeting. I'm pretty.
I would like to know what the Stephen Hill Speak Sobriety Program is.
I can get you something on it. It's a co-op with Morris Hills Regional. So we're doing, the donation from our municipal alliance is to fund it. And it's being done in cooperation with Morris Knowles as well. I can get some kind of information for you.
All right. Yeah, I was just kind of curious what it was.
The Municipal Alliance funds anti-drug and alcohol programs every year to the schools. And so this falls under that category. I'm not familiar with this particular presentation. We can get some information from Mr. Corman, but that's what it falls under, is anti-drug and alcohol.
Yeah, and our people looked into it, like our counselors, to see if it was appropriate for us, and they were interested in having it. But I will get you more information on it.
Any other?
We don't expect to do it until 2023, sometime in early 2023.
Any other questions, comments? All right, Mr. Cass, would you mind moving us through operations at our next meeting?
Certainly. At the next meeting, I will ask the board to approve item number 1 under transportation, to approve the rental of a 24 school passenger bus from Learned Limited LLC at a cost of $50 a day as needed. Number 2, under building and grounds, we have the 2022-2023 memorandum of agreement with the Denville Police Department and the 2022-2023 memorandum of understanding with the Denville Police Department for live streaming cameras. And as mentioned previously here, this won't be a 24/7 type of monitoring there. It'll be used for emergencies type of situations where they could get to the scene very quickly rather than wait till somebody gets there to assess what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. Any questions, comments? Damaris, just a quick note. I think on item transportation 1.1, we just need to flip the words and 24 passenger school bus. I think it should be, right? Not 24 schools.
Yes, thank you.
And actually, I'll just put a note out there to thank you to Learner Limited. Obviously, you can see that rate and note. I can't even rent a sedan for $50 a day now. So
You're not getting a
we
Kia.
appreciate them working with us on that rate.
They don't even want to charge us, but we had to come up with a dollar amount. And it's as needed because we do not have a spare minibus at this time, just in case we might break. It might break.
Understandable. Excellent. Appreciate the collaboration with Learner Limited and Little Learner Academy. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Kim.
Yeah, in reference to the school bus, 24 passenger, they have to follow the same guidelines, regulations with regards to inspections of the school bus and safety and maintenance and repair, correct?
That is correct. And as a courtesy to them, because they leave their bus, the 24 passenger bus, in our garage, we service, inspect the buses as well for them.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to good of the cause. Committee reports, correspondence, discussion items. We'll start off with any board meeting highlights. Dr. Porter, did you have any
Yeah.
written down?
How about FEMA grant, 55,000, HIB grades, and strategic plan invitation?
We want to put the audit on there? Audit report? Or?
We could say the audit too.
Anything else for the good of the cause? Anybody? I'll just add one thing. The Denville Police Department recently had events, I think, at Lakeview and Valley View, and they're going to be doing one at Riverview where they brought ice pops over, and my kids came home got to hang out with the cops for a little bit, and really nice, I think, just kind of community building event. And even for the middle schoolers, I think they enjoyed it, and good chance to kind of build that camaraderie between the police department and the schools. So I appreciate the police department doing that, and I appreciate the schools taking the time out of the day to dedicate for it. So thank you for that. Anybody else? No? All right, we're going to move to our second public comment section. I'm going to open that at 8:13 p.m. And seeing no one come up to the microphone and no one in person, I'm going to close that second public comment section at 8:13. Dr. Forte, do we have a need for executive?
Yes, we do.
And we will not be taking any action on additional items after the meeting.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Cass, would you mind bringing us to executive?
Certainly. I move to convene an executive session in accordance with the Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this closed session will be to discuss
Student issues, personnel, and legal.
legal, student issues, and personnel. Minutes of the session will be made available to the public when the need of confidentiality no longer exists.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Cass and Mr. Capello. All in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
Any nays? No? Any abstentions? No? We are in executive session as of 8:14 p.m.